Camilla secretly tries trapping royals until George and Charlotte ruin everything badly. They say Balmoral is peaceful in summer, a place where royals unwind, where the air smells like wildflowers and old stone. But in 2025, it was different. It started subtle, a weird silence in the halls, locked doors that never used to be locked, and a chill in the wind that didn't come from the Scottish wet. George felt it first, not with fear, but with curiosity. The kind of curiosity only kids have before the truth hits them like a train. It was during one of those golden evenings. The whole family was gathered outside, Charles sitting quietly with a book, Anne laughing about her horse riding days, Kate and William whispering beside the garden bench. George was filming the sunset with his phone, trying to capture the perfect frame, when he noticed something strange. No signal. He tried refreshing, rebooting, even climbing up the nearest slope. Still dead. At first, he thought it was just a glitch, but then Charlotte said something that stuck in his head. "George, your phone's not broken. Something's wrong." He laughed it off, but it lodged somewhere in his mind. That was the moment he would realize later, when everything began to unravel. That night, when the castle was asleep and the old clock in the hallway ticked louder than usual, George couldn't sleep. Charlotte lay wide awake too, and when she whispered about Camilla, about what they'd overheard on the balcony earlier, it was like someone turned the lights on inside George's head. They had heard her. They had really heard her. Keep them here longer. No contact with the outside. Tom and Laura. The council. Camilla wasn't being poetic. She wasn't telling a story. She was giving orders. So George did what he always dreamed of doing in the adventure books he loved. He became the hero. A little one, sure, but one with sharp ears and a sharper mind. He whispered to Charlotte, "What if we look around? Just a bit, just to be sure." Charlotte, brave in her own quiet way, nodded. She clutched her teddy like a shield and followed him barefoot into the corridor. The castle wasn't as magical at night. It breathed, it creaked, it whispered things. Candles flickered. Paintings seemed to follow them, but they pressed on, down the side staircase, past the old library, toward the archives. That's when they saw her again. Camilla, alone this time. Except she wasn't really alone. A man in black stood with her. He had a silver case, not large, but sleek and cold. George and Charlotte ducked into the shadows, hearts pounding. Camilla's voice was low but sharp. "No signals, no communication. Make sure they stay inside." Then the man opened the case. Inside, something beeped, softly but deadly. George didn't understand the technology, but he didn't need to. The message was clear. His phone signal blocked, on purpose. They didn't wait to hear more. They slipped away, back through the dark halls like mice avoiding the trap. When they finally reached their room, Charlotte collapsed onto the bed, clutching her bear like a lifeline. "George," she said, her voice cracking, "what if they're trapping all of us?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the ceiling, the pieces falling into place. The castle wasn't just acting strange. It was strange. And Camilla, the smiley, elegant woman who always brought extra cookies to tea, wasn't what she seemed. That night, two kids became detectives. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Because no one else was watching, no one else was listening. And somewhere deep in the halls of Balmoral, something was moving. Something cold, something calculated, and George knew. It wasn't just about a blocked signal or a suspicious note. It was something bigger, something dangerous, and they were already in the middle of it. George woke up with a start. He'd barely slept, but the weight in his chest hadn't gone away. Charlotte was already sitting up, wide-eyed, still clutching her teddy bear like it might whisper answers. The early light poured through the tall windows, but it didn't feel warm. It felt like a spotlight, like something was watching them. He threw on a sweater and grabbed his phone again, still hoping for a miracle. Nothing. The same cold message blinked back at him. No signal. He turned to Charlotte. "We're not imagining this. We need to tell Mom and Dad right now." They bolted out the door, small feet tapping against the stone floor. The hall was empty, but the air felt heavier than usual. George knocked hard on their parents' door. No answer. He pushed it open. The room was spotless. Bed untouched, a note sat on the desk, barely a few lines. "North Grounds, inspection." Back later. Charlotte read it over his shoulder. "That's not Mom's handwriting," she whispered, "and they always tell us before they leave." George didn't say anything. He just stared at the note like it might blink back at him. The ink looked fresh. Too fresh. They ran to the grand hall where the servants moved like ghosts, silent, efficient, unreadable. George spotted Mr. Harris, the kindly steward who used to sneak them sweets. "Mr. Harris," George asked, keeping his voice as steady as possible, "did my parents say anything before they left?" Mr. Harris froze. His eyes didn't meet theirs. "The North Grounds?" he said quickly, then returned to dusting a vase with trembling fingers. Charlotte tugged on George's sleeve as they walked away. "He's lying, I can tell." George nodded. Everything was wrong. The staff wasn't friendly anymore. They were cold, robotic. Eyes followed them as they moved. Conversation stopped when they passed. The entire castle felt like it had grown ears. In the hallway, near the staircase, two servants stood talking in hushed tones. The gates had been locked since morning. Double-check the perimeter, especially those two children. Charlotte's grip on George's hand tightened, pressed flat against the wall, holding their breath until the footsteps faded. "They're watching us," she whispered. George spotted something on the floor near the stairs. A torn piece of paper, half soaked from morning mist that had slipped through a cracked window. He picked it up. "Signal blocking active. Tom and Laura reporting. Watch the children. Do not engage." He took a photo of it with his dead phone camera anyway, just in case. "This is proof. We have to find someone who'll believe us." Charlotte's eyes lit up with sudden hope. "Aunt Anne, she'll listen. She always listens." They moved like shadows through the stone corridors, ducking into recesses and behind statues. At every turn, the castle seemed to get colder, as if it had a heartbeat of its own, a slow, watchful pulse. A glimmer of torchlight flickered at the far end of the hallway. "A servant, coming fast. Run," George whispered. They slipped behind an old tapestry, hearts slamming against their ribs. The servant passed, muttering something about a gate check. Once he was gone, they crept out and followed the narrow stairwell toward the bell tower, where Aunt Anne's room overlooked the entire east side of the castle. Charlotte paused near a cracked stone. Her voice didn't answer. But the truth was already forming in his mind. This wasn't just a plan to trap them. It was bigger, smarter, scarier. They reached the top step. The door was cracked open. Light spilled out. Inside were Anne, William, and Kate, dusty, pale, and wide-eyed. George and Charlotte burst in. "We have proof," George said, holding up the crumpled note. "They're trapping us." The room fell into a heavy silence. William took the scrap of paper from George's hand and studied it closely, his jaw tightening. Anne leaned over his shoulder, her face unreadable. Kate knelt and wrapped both children into her arms, holding them as if she feared they might vanish. "You did the right thing," she whispered. Anne's voice sliced through the still air. "We suspected Camilla, but this? Blocking signals? Locking the gates? Using the children as leverage?" Her tone turned sharp, furious. "This isn't royal strategy, this is a coup!" A knock cracked against the door like a shot. No one breathed. Then a familiar voice slid through, calm, sweet, and terrifying. "William? Anne, may I join you?" Camilla stepped in before anyone could answer, her dark silk gown gliding across the stone like mist. Behind her stood a silent servant, expression blank. Camilla's eyes flicked to the phone on the table, then to the children. "How cozy," she said with a gentle smile. The whole family gathered. William stepped forward, blocking her view. "You locked us in. You sent Tom and Laura to London behind our backs. You're using the council." Camilla tilted her head slightly. So much imagination. Must be those books George reads. "I heard you," George said quietly, standing straight. All of it. Camilla's eyes narrowed, her smile twitching at the edges. "Children see fragments, shadows. They create monsters in the dark." Anne wasn't having it. "The shadows are yours, Camilla. You turned Balmoral into a prison." For a moment, Camilla dropped the mask, her expression twisted, not into fear, but something colder. Calculation. Her voice lost its honey. "The gates are sealed. The staff answer to me. You'll tell your story. I'll tell mine. The public won't believe two frightened children over the queen consort." "Not for long," William said, "because this ends now." The door slammed behind her as she left, but the echo lingered like a threat. Anne turned back to the group. "We take this to Charles right now. The council has to hear it before Tom and Laura pull whatever strings they've lined up." George and Charlotte stayed close as the group moved swiftly through the winding halls. Servants glanced up but didn't interfere. The silence in the castle was no longer just eerie, it was suffocating. In the great hall, Charles sat slumped in his chair, the morning light casting a washed-out glow across his weary face. Camilla sat beside him, her expression composed and unreadable. William stepped forward and laid the note and phone on the table. "This is proof. She blocked all outside contact. She orchestrated our isolation, and her children are manipulating the council as we speak." Camilla laughed softly, not turning her head. "Scraps of paper and bedtime tales. That's your case." George stepped forward, his voice shaking but loud. "We heard everything. She said it herself. No one leaves, no contact." Charlotte added, "She's scared us." "Everyone's scared." Charles looked at them for a long time. His eyes, foggy at first, slowly began to clear. He turned to Camilla. "Is it true?" Camilla's face hardened. "I did what was necessary to protect the family. By cutting it off?" Anne shot back. Charles took a breath, deep and slow. Then he said, "From this moment, Camilla, you have no authority here. Tom and Laura's involvement in council matters is over." The room froze. Camilla rose, her eyes like ice. "You'll regret this." But no one moved. No one stopped her as she turned and walked out. George felt Charlotte's hand slip into his, her voice barely a whisper. "We really did it." Anne glanced down at them, her expression softer now. "You did more than that. You saved all of us." Sunlight pierced the clouds above Balmoral, but in George's chest, something brighter burned. Courage.